A man stands in the stinging smoke of a shattered camp, his sandals heavy with ash. He has just ground a god of gold into fine powder. When modern readers hear the phrase, "the book," they immediately project forward to the end of time, struck from the census of the living, and sealed in the dark. And this slaughtered lamb holds the book. It is now called the Lamb's Book of Life. Your survival is no longer measured by your physical breath. It is measured by your connection to the one who walked out of the tomb. This vision changes the blood-soaked dirt of the first century. This is why the early Christians walk into the Colosseum singing. This is why they kneel in the arena sand while the wild animals circle. This is why they watch the executioner raise the heavy iron sword and do not flinch. They are not afraid of the erasure, because they know their names are etched into a parchment that Rome cannot burn. But this cosmic guarantee, this beautiful promise of eternal solidarity, introduces a completely new kind of terror for the modern reader. Because John does not just offer comfort, he writes down a warning that has haunted believers for 2,000 years. And the detail that keeps people awake at night is hiding in plain sight in the 3rd chapter. If you have spent any time in modern church culture, you have probably felt the cold dread of this specific verse. You sit on the edge of your bed, the thin paper of the Bible rustling under your thumb in the quiet of the night, to the book of Revelation, to pearly gates and an eternal attendance sheet checked by an angel, and you read the words, Jesus dictates to the church in Sardis. He says to the one who conquers, I will never blot out his name from the book of life. Instead of hearing an ironclad promise, your brain automatically constructs a threat. Human psychology is wired to reverse the grammar of a guarantee. If the one who conquers keeps their name, we immediately assume the one who struggles, the one who doubts, and the one who stumbles will lose theirs. We imagine a God who paces the floors of heaven like a reluctant cosmic accountant. We picture him holding a massive, heavy ledger and a sharp reed stylus, simply waiting for an excuse to dip his pen and strike through our name in thick black ink. You carry this anxiety in the tightness of your chest and the clench of your jaw. You wonder if that season of heavy addiction, that period of profound deconstruction, or that silent moral failure was the moment the divine eraser finally came out. You wonder if you are currently walking around as a spiritual ghost, entirely unaware that your citizenship in the new creation was quietly revoked 3 years ago. We treat the cosmic registry like a precarious subscription service that can be canceled the moment our performance drops. This fear is not a sign of deep spiritual reverence. We assume Moses is simply offering up his own eternal soul in a moment of poetic hyperbole. It is a fundamental misunderstanding of the text. We read the book of Revelation as if it were written in a vacuum, completely divorced from history, speaking directly to our modern, individualized, anxiety-ridden culture. But John was not writing to a 21st century audience terrified of losing their salvation. He was writing to a very specific group of exhausted, compromised people living on the western edge of Asia Minor. They were trapped inside a local culture that was entirely obsessed with public reputation, civic honors, and the permanent recording of names in stone. Jesus is not introducing a new theological anxiety to keep them in line. He is subverting an anxiety they already lived with every single day in the Roman Empire. To understand why the resurrected Christ uses the terrifying image of a blotted-out name, you cannot just look at the English translation. You have to look at the exact dirt those first-century believers were standing on. You have to walk through the gates of a city that thought it was untouchable. A fortress sits on a sheer cliff of crumbling rock. The wind howls through the valley below. Gold dust glitters in the mud of the Pactolus River. This is Sardis. It is wealthy. It is arrogant. It believes it is untouchable, but the rock is too high. The guards get lazy. But if you look closer at the cultural air Moses was breathing, at the physical realities of the ancient world, you start to see something the attendance sheet reading completely misses. They fall asleep on the wall. An ancient Persian army scales the vertical cliff in the dead of night. They slip over the battlements. The city falls without a single sword being drawn. Centuries later, a Greek general uses the exact same tactic in the dark. The city falls again, Sardis is a city that dies while it dreams. And by the late 1st century, the Christian community inside this city has completely absorbed its civic DNA. They are comfortable. They are compromising. They are blending flawlessly into the pagan culture around them. Jesus writes them a devastating letter. You have the reputation of being alive, but you are dead. They are spiritual corpses wearing the clothes of a living church. But there is a tiny remnant. A few people who have not compromised. A few who refuse to burn the incense to the emperor. And to this exhausted, terrified minority, Jesus speaks the famous words about the book of life. To feel the weight of his promise, you have to watch what happens in the public square. In Sardis, the civic registry is not hidden in a back room. It is a public monument. It is the ultimate measure of human worth. If you commit a capital crime, if you betray the empire, the local magistrate does not just execute you, he erases you. He walks out to the public ledger. He carries a wet sponge and a scraping knife. This book is not a metaphor for the afterlife. It is the civic registry of the living. He violently scrubs your name off the parchment in front of your neighbors. You lose your trade guild. You lose your legal protections. You lose your identity. You are officially blotted out. This is the agonizing choice the believers in Sardis face every single morning. Bow to the Roman gods, or be erased from the city, burn the incense, or become a ghost. The threat of the blotted out name is not a theological metaphor for the afterlife. It is a physical, terrifying reality of the present. The threat of erasure is not coming from heaven. It is coming from the Roman magistrates. Jesus is not introducing a new spiritual anxiety to keep them in line. He is offering the ultimate cosmic antidote. But the sheer, unbreakable power of that antidote is locked inside a single Greek verb. When Jesus speaks to the exhausted remnant in Revelation chapter 3, verse 5, he looks directly at their greatest cultural terror and says, "I will never blot out his name from the book of life." The word translated as blot out is the Greek verb exalypho. To grasp the visceral impact of this word, you have to understand ancient chemistry. In the ancient world, ink was not like the ink we use today. Modern ink contains acid. It bites deep into the fibers of the paper and leaves a permanent, indelible stain. Moses is not asking to be sent to a future hell. He is asking to be unwritten from the present order of creation. But first-century ink was usually a simple mixture of carbon soot, tree gum, and water. It did not penetrate the fibers. It just sat delicately on the rough surface of the papyrus. If a scribe made a mistake, or if a Roman magistrate wanted to erase a traitor from the civic registry, they did not cross the name out with a pen. They took a wet sea sponge and physically wiped the ink off the document. Exalypho literally means to wash over, to plaster, to smear away. It is the exact word you would use for a man scrubbing a public ledger with a wet sponge until the name dissolves into dirty water. This is exactly what the believers in Sardis are facing from the empire. The local magistrates are holding the wet sponges. The culture is actively washing away their livelihoods, their reputations, and their civic standing. And Jesus uses their deepest fear to make an unbreakable promise. Look at the grammar of the original Greek text. Jesus uses an emphatic double negative, ou me exalypho. I will by no means ever wash away. Jesus is saying, the empire might take their wet sponge to your earthly citizenship, but I hold the cosmic ledger. He is not standing over your life, holding a wet sponge. The Apostle Paul uses this exact same Greek verb in Colossians chapter 2. He is invoking a legal, municipal, and spiritual mechanism that would have made perfect, terrifying sense to anyone standing in the shadow of the Egyptian empire. When Paul describes the crushing legal debt of our failures, the written record of every commandment we have ever broken, he says God took that specific document and nailed it to the cross. And the word Paul uses for what happens to the debt? Exalypho. Wiped away. Smeared out. Plastered over. The only thing the divine scribe washes away is the debt. The name stays. The ink of the Lamb does not sit on the surface of the parchment. It cannot be washed away by your doubts. your silent struggles, or the decrees of a hostile culture. This verse is not a warning about how easily you can be erased. It is a guarantee of how permanently you are known, because when you step back and look at every time this book is opened, a breathtaking picture of the Creator finally emerges. A prophet stood on a burning mountain and demanded his name be stricken, and the divine scribe refused the trade. A hunted king sat in a freezing cave and begged for his enemies to lose their breath. And the civic registry of the present remained the measure of survival. An ancient city checked the papyrus scroll at the gates, and the ones written down were kept alive through the famine. An exiled apostle looked through. He knows exactly what a scroll of names is used for, and he knows exactly what it means. A rip in the sky, and the earthly census was replaced by the eternal architecture of the throne room. A crucified king walked out of the tomb, and his blood became the ink of a new creation. A terrified church watched their names being scrubbed from the public square, and the resurrected Christ promised to hold them in the cosmic ledger. A crushing legal debt was wiped away with a wet sponge, and the names of the forgiven were left permanently on the page. One ledger, one scribe, one ink that cannot be washed. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the wet sponge in Sardis. The image of a local magistrate walking up to a stone monument, taking a piece of sea sponge and dissolving a human life into dirty water. It is a terrible thing to be erased. It is agonizing to watch the culture, or your community, or your own failures scrub away your standing in the world. If you are in a season where you feel like a spiritual ghost, where a quiet struggle, a period of profound deconstruction, or a massive moral failure has convinced you that when a king dips his pen in ink and strikes a name from the parchment, to feel the weight of the risk Moses is taking, divine eraser has finally come out. Revelation chapter 3 is a place to sit. The Book of Life is not a precarious record of your performance. It is the permanent inventory of His grace. You are not held by your ability to maintain a flawless civic standing. You do not have to wake up every morning terrified of the scraping knife. The sponge has only ever been used on your debt. The ink used for your name has already survived the grave. If this reached something heavy inside of you, subscribe. Leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who is exhausted from trying to earn their place on the ledger. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. And may the God who refused to erase Moses, who held the fragile church in Sardis, and who nailed the written record of your failures to the wood, walk with you in the quiet of the night and remind you that your name has never once been in danger, and to understand why this specific phrase will echo through the Psalms, the prophets, and all the way to the final pages of the New Testament. He has just forced 1 million of His own people to drink the water contaminated with the metallic dust of their own rebellion. You have to step out of our modern theological frameworks. You have to walk into the dirt, the ink, and the politics of a Bronze Age city. Picture an Egyptian scribe sitting in the dust of a municipal courtyard. His reed stylus scratches against a coarse sheet of papyrus. He dips the tip into a mixture of crushed soot and water. He is recording the names of the living. This is the physical reality behind the theological metaphor. Every ancient city has a list, a registry of citizens, a roster for the military, a roll for taxation. If your name is on the scroll, you belong to the city. You receive the king's rations during a famine. You are protected by the stone walls during a siege. You exist in the eyes of the empire. But the scroll is not permanent. Names are added at birth. Names are removed at natural death. Names are violently scrubbed out for treason. In the ancient Near East, the king's scribe held the power of life and death. To be erased from the registry is to lose your citizenship. It is to lose your ancestral land. It is to become a ghost while your lungs are still pulling in air. The ink was literal, and the consequences were immediate. When Moses speaks to the Creator on Sinai, he is using the language of the empire he just defeated. The air smells like burnt offerings that went completely wrong. The mountain towering above him is still wrapped in a terrifying dark fire, vibrating with a localized earthquake. He is standing in the wreckage of a golden calf, holding the shattered fragments of a broken covenant, and he is laying his own civic standing on the line. He says, "Forgive them, or erase me." This is not a request for future damnation. It is a demand for present solidarity. Moses is linking his own fate to the guilty. He is saying, if they do not survive this wilderness, I do not want to survive it. If they lose their place in your new nation, strike my name from the roster right now. He is weaponizing his own righteous standing to shield a rebellious people. He is acting as a human shield before the cosmic registry. And God accepts the premise of the book, but rejects the terms of the bargain. God replies, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book." The ledger is real. The civic roster of the living exists, but the guilt cannot be transferred like a legal debt. The ancient mind understood this exchange perfectly. They lived and died by the clay tablets stacked in Sumerian ziggurats. They survived because of the papyrus scrolls locked in Egyptian temple archives. A name written down was a life sustained. A name washed away was a life extinguished. Moses survives the mountain. His name remains on the ledger. He is 80 years old, physically exhausted, entirely alone, and carrying the weight of a fractured, volatile nation. The nation moves forward into the burning sand. But centuries later, another leader will invoke this exact same book. He will not be standing on a fiery mountain. He will be sinking in the mud. And he will not be asking for his own erasure. He will be demanding the erasure of men who are actively hunting him in the dark. A king sits in the damp, freezing darkness of a Judean cave, and his throat is bleeding. He is not wearing a crown. He is running for his life. The physical exhaustion is so total that he describes the sensation as sinking in deep mire, as floodwaters washing over his head. The air in the cave is thick and cold. Every sound outside the entrance, a snapping branch, the wind moving across the rocks, could be the men who are hunting him. He is weary from crying out. His throat is parched like dry sand. His eyes are failing. This is the visceral, terrified reality behind Psalm 69. David is writing from the absolute bottom of human desperation. His enemies are wealthy. They are powerful, and they are circulating lies about him in the city gates. He has nothing left to defend himself with. He turns, walks back up the sharp rocks into the burning cloud, and issues an ultimatum to the creator of the universe. Accept his poetry and his covenant with God. And in the middle of this agonizing lament, David reaches back, across the centuries, and grabs hold of the exact same image Moses used on the burning mountain. But David does not ask to be removed from the ledger. He turns the ledger into a weapon. He writes down a devastating curse. Let them be blotted out of the book of the living. Let them not be enrolled among the righteous. It is a shocking thing to hear from the man, described as being after God's own heart. We are so conditioned to read the Psalms as spiritual metaphors that we gloss over the sheer, violent impact of what he is asking for. David is invoking the ancient civic registry, the roster of the empire, the scroll of breath. This is not a vindictive wish for their future damnation. It is a demand for their immediate, physical ruin. David is asking the divine scribe to take the reed stylus, dip it in the black ink, and violently smear it across the names. Moses climbs the mountain. God listens, and the prophet speaks a single sentence that introduces a concept we are still wrestling with 3,000 years later, of the men hunting him. He is asking for their citizenship in the land of the living to be revoked. He wants their oxygen stopped. He wants them unwritten from the present order of creation, just as surely as a traitor would be stricken from the king's role in Jerusalem. In the ancient mind, your enemies do not just disappear. They are legislated out of existence by the sovereign. But to fully grasp the weight of what David is invoking, and to understand how this concept will eventually become the ultimate symbol of hope in the New Testament, you cannot rely on the English translation. The phrase, "book of the living," feels passive to our ears. It sounds like a dusty encyclopedia sitting on a shelf. To feel what David felt in that cave, you have to look at the two specific Hebrew words. His trembling hands actually wrote on the parchment. But here is what most people miss when they read those English words. The phrase David uses in Psalm 69, verse 28, is not a theological abstraction. The words are physical. The words are heavy. The phrase Book of the Living is the Hebrew Sefer Chaim. Look at the first word, Sefer. But now, if you will forgive their sin, but if not, please blot me out of your book that you have written. Blot me out of your book. It means a writing, a document, a scroll made of animal skin or woven papyrus. It is an object you can hold in your hands, something that requires black ink and a scribe. In ancient Israel, the Sefer was everything. It contained the genealogies. It proved you belonged to a tribe. When Nehemiah rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem centuries later, he did not just count the people. He searched the Sefer, the civic registry. If your name was not in the scroll, you were excluded from the priesthood. You were excluded from the community. It is the tally, the record, the irrefutable evidence of citizenship. Now, look at the second word, Chaim. It is translated as living or life. But in Hebrew, the suffix I am makes the word plural. It does not mean a generalized, abstract state of being. It means lives, plural. It is the exact same word used in Genesis chapter 2, when God breathes into the dirt and creates the breath of life, the breath of Chaim. It is the rising and falling of the chest. It is the pulse in the throat. It is the heat of blood moving through the veins. The Sefer Chaim is not a metaphor for eternity. It is the active inventory of the breathing. If realizing that the ancient language completely rewrites a familiar verse is exactly the kind of thing you are looking for, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because it is the first time this image appears in the biblical text. A divine ledger, a cosmic record keeping track of names. Every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So David demands his enemies be stricken from the Sefer Chaim. He is asking for their breath to stop. He is asking the divine scribe to strike their names from the roster of the conscious, waking world for centuries. This is how Israel understood the book. A literal, earthly ledger. To be written in it meant you survived the famine. You survived the Assyrian siege. You survived the Babylonian exile. The Book of Life was a book of the present. But then history fractures. A new empire rises that changes the rules of the ledger. Rome arrives. The physical city of Jerusalem is occupied. The streets are patrolled by legionaries. The temple system begins to crack under the weight of imperial taxes and mass crucifixions. Suddenly, physical survival is no longer guaranteed for the righteous. Being on a civic registry is irrelevant when the empire can drag you out of your house and nail you to wood whenever it wants. The definition of citizenship has to change. The definition of survival has to change. And to offer any hope at all, the Book of Life has to become something entirely different. An old man stands on the jagged coast of a prison island. The Aegean Sea crashes against black volcanic rock, throwing cold salt spray into his face. Most people assume this is just a rhetorical flourish, a dramatic moment of desperate self-sacrifice from a weary leader. His hands are scarred from breaking stones in the imperial quarry. His friends are all dead. They did not survive the local famines. They did not survive the mob violence. They did not survive the executioners of the empire. By every earthly metric, their names have been violently stricken from the registry of the living. They are gone. The civic roster of Rome has erased them. But then, the sky rips open. John looks up. He does not see a Roman courtroom. He does not see an earthly emperor unrolling a fading papyrus scroll. He sees a throne made of terrifying light. He sees a glassy sea mixed with fire. He sees a courtroom that stretches across the cosmos. And he sees the books being opened. This is the pivot that alters human history. The Book of Life is no longer a civic registry of a Bronze Age city. It is the eternal architecture of a new creation. The empire can take your land. The empire can break your bones. The Empire can wipe your name from the imperial census. But the Empire cannot reach the cosmic ledger. The ink of the divine scribe is not bound to the earth. The citizenship is not tied to a physical city that can burn. Jon watches as a lamb, looking as though it had been slain, steps into the center of the throne room. A savior who was himself erased from the earthly ledger. A king who was crucified as a traitor.